Hello everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to give you this presentation on Strapi customizations and Strapi Cloud titled Why Strapi is Awesome. I might be a little bit biased, but I started with Strapi as an end user first before starting at the company. Today, we're going to talk about Strapi in a nutshell. And most importantly, I want to mention most of the common customizations that Strapi allows you to have. We're going to talk about DEETS, which stands for Data Export Import Transfer System, why we created it, and I'm going to showcase Strapi Cloud, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. So I'm really excited. My name is Paul, and I'm a Strapi addict, or you could say a developer advocate at Strapi. I have two cats. One of them is crazy, probably because he loves PHP, which nothing wrong with PHP, I'm just kidding. But they're amazing, but they're always interrupting me working when I'm trying to get stuff done. And the reason why I love Strapi so much, it brings me back to this quote: don't try to reinvent the wheel. The things you're doing, no matter how seemingly unique, have been done before. Take advantage and perhaps expand upon them. And this is where I think Strapi shines, is its ability to be customized and have developers add additional features through plugin development and so on to make Strapi fit their use case. So Strapi in a nutshell. It was created by Pierre, Jim, and Aurelien in 2015. They were frustrated with the status of traditional CMSs and not having the ability to share content everywhere. The most important things that I love about Strapi, it's open source, community-driven, highly customizable based on Node, provides both REST and GraphQL, and allows fast development. You could use any framework as your front end, literally deliver content anywhere. And you could have it be self-hosted, or now we're going to have our cloud offering. And I should have changed that in the slide. Cloud is out. And our vision and focus for 2023 and beyond is to still continue to be the most developer-friendly CMS on the market, but now also shift the focus on providing amazing Strapi Cloud support, as well as continuing to improve editing experience for our editors and content managers. And like I mentioned, Strapi is amazing because of our growing marketplace, where you could find additional plugins that add additional functionality to your application. And if a plugin does not exist, you as a developer could go ahead and create it and share it on the marketplace as well, and which gives us a pretty amazing ecosystem of all the different ways that you could integrate third-party services via plugins and providers. In this presentation, I wanted to focus on the broader topic of customization and showcasing Strapi Cloud. This way, if you find something that interested or you were not aware of, you could try it out yourselves and read more about it in our documentation. So the first thing I want to start with is talking about Strapi CLI, a way for you to do useful things with your Strapi application. So Strapi provides this amazing CLI tool. You could learn more about all its amazing commands by typing yarn Strapi help, and it will show you a list of all the commands that you have available for you. One of the ones that stands out is Strapi generate. So what you're able to do, you're able to run yarn Strapi generate, which will allow you to easily scaffold things. You could easily create controllers, content types, even scaffold complete plugins, policies, middlewares, and services. So if I wanted to create a policy, I would have just clicked policy, give it a name, test policy, click enter. Where do I want to create it? Do I want to create it in a root of the project, of an existing API, or in an existing plugin? I'm going to go ahead and create it at the root, and we'll go ahead and create that folder for us. And within our code editor, we could go ahead and see that it created a policies root folder for us with our test policy that we created, including the example. So I think this is very useful, and I suggest you play around with the tool and check it out, all the different things you could generate. Another useful CLI command we have is our list command. For instance, we just created a policy. Maybe I forgot what the name of it is. When I want to look it up, I could run yarn Strapi policies :list, and it's going to show all the policies in our application. And here we see our global policy that just created called test policy. And then I have another policy that checks if the user is the author of the article that they wrote, which we'll take a look in a little bit. And you could do the same thing for routes, middlewares, content types, hooks, services, and controllers. So another example, we could do yarn Strapi, let's say controllers, and then we'll list all of our controllers that we have in our applications. There's lots of other commands, but the last one I want to show you today is yarn Strapi console, which will allow you to run Strapi with a interactive console while your application running. This way, in real time, you could look things up in your Strapi application. You could even see the whole API that's available to you by typing Strapi. There's definitely a lot here to take in, and I definitely suggest playing around with it. But if you're looking for everything that's possibly exists in the Strapi API, you could find it within the console. You could also do strapi.api, which is going to be the APIs that you created inside your API folder. So here we could see my categories content type, you see my article content type, you see my about page, and so on. And you're able to dive deeper. For instance, if I want to take a look inside API/send email, I could take a look and see what's available inside. I know I have a service that I created, so I could look up all the services by typing services, click enter, and it's going to show me the service that I have. And this correlates to what I have in my code here. So if we go under source API, we see my send emails, and here's my send email service that basically allows me to send my email. So play around with Strapi console and explore all the different things that you can do. I'll make sure to share some links with you where you could find additional resources in the documentation. So the superpower of Strapi is the fact that it's highly customizable. You could do so many customizations from requests, routes, policies, middlewares, controller services, model responses, and webhooks. Way too much stuff to cover in one video, but I do want to showcase my demo application that I have created to show you some of these customizations and to hopefully give you some ideas of what you can do. And you could always reference this documentation page that I will make sure to provide in the notes. So here I have my basic Strapi application. It's basically a blog. I have my articles content types. I'm utilizing our dynamic zones to allow our content editors to dynamically choose the content that they would like to display. We have our categories and our users, which are our authors of our articles. And the first thing I wanted to do is to add functionality where I'm able to find an individual article by a slug. Currently, that's not something you get out of the box. You're able to find it by ID, but not the slug. So let's see this in action, and then I'll show you what I did to create the functionality. First thing I'm going to do is go into settings, go into API tokens, and I'm going to use my token to make an authorized request. So typically you could make all your endpoints public, but let's say you just want people to be able to see your content from a website that you want publicly available. So you could create a read-only API token, make it custom, and I'm going to make sure that I have the ability to find by slug, find one, or find many, and also have to make sure I have permissions to get my user information. I'm going to make sure that I regenerate my token, copy it to use it in my request, and save. Now, if you take a look here, if you've used Strapi before and you look at the public, currently there's no permissions to access this information without providing the token. So if you just go into the URL to try to get the data, you won't be able to do it. You would have to do it from the website where I'm able to use the token. So let's see this in action in Insomnia. So if I just try to make this request without the bearer token, I'm going to get forbidden error. So let's go ahead and provide the valid token, and I'm able to click send and get the data. And as you can see here, I'm hitting my endpoint articles, find by slug, and I'm passing a slug to get the data. So let's look in code how I accomplish this. So inside our code editor, under source, under API, under articles, if we take a look inside our controllers, we have our articles.js file. If we take a look here I am defining a custom controller, which will get the params. It will call our Strapi entity service to find many, and I'm passing the query where I'm asking, make sure you filter by the slug and return that data. We sanitize that data and return it back to us. Now, by itself, this controller would not work. So what you have to do is you have to define a route that will trigger this controller once you land on it. So after creating my controller, I went ahead and created a route. In order to create custom routes, you would have to make a separate file. I decided to call this route.js. If you go inside here, I'm defining my route. We're using get method. We're defining the URL or the path that will trigger our handler, which is our controller. I'm also creating a middleware that I pass inside this config object to create additional action that I want to happen when someone hits this endpoint. If you're looking to learn more, you could check out our documentation under the controllers, and we'll show you a couple of different things you could do. You could create a complete brand new controller. You could wrap a controller, or you could replace an action altogether. What we recommend, if instead of replacing, is go ahead and define your own controller. This will make it easier if in the future you're migrating or updating, you're not overriding pre-existing core controllers that are available to you. So before I show you the simple implementation of my middleware and why I'm using it, in Strapi v4, you're able to have granular control to what data you get back through our population and field selection flags. You could read more about it in our documentation. There's an amazing blog post written by Kellen that I will also add to the notes here, where he shows how to use route-based middleware to handle default population with query logic. So the problem is when you're starting out, by default, all your population structure needs to be defined and sent on each client-side request. If you've never done this before, a lot of times you're writing your population logic using LHS bracket syntax. You can't fix this by using a QS library that allows you to write this in a object notation that, in my opinion, is more human readable. But what if you could, instead of sending these queries from your front end, especially if you know the outcome you're looking to get, why not having them automatically done from your backend? And this is where route-based middleware comes in, where you're able to define this logic inside your middleware. And that's exactly what I've done. So here my code, if we take a look at my middleware, basically what I'm doing is I'm not allowing the front-end user to pass any additional queries or params. All of that's going to be ignored. Instead, I am defining what data I want to return in this populate object, and I'm passing it inside my middleware. So when people make the request, this middleware will only return the data that I specify here. And you could read more about filtering in our documentation. So let's take a look at action. The first thing I'm going to do first is go ahead and remove this middleware for now to see what type of response that we get. So here inside Insomnia, if I make a request without specifying anything that I want to populate, I'm just going to get the first level data, which is the title, description, slug. If we look at our content builder inside articles, we're only going to be able to see title, description, and slug, cover, category, and even our blogs, their relationship data that we have to specify specifically to get. Now, the workaround for this is to use our populate all flag, which will get the next level nesting, but won't get the third level. And I'll quickly demonstrate here in Insomnia. So now we're able to add our populate.all flag, and we're able to populate the next level relationships here. But maybe there's some things I don't need. If there's a way that I could only return the data that I want. And what I'm doing inside my middleware is doing exactly that. So let me uncomment this first and just review our middleware one more time, defining what items I want to populate and which fields that I want to return. So now you're able to control the amount of data you're returning to your front end. So taking a look at Insomnia one more time, now that we're running through our middleware, I don't have to pass any params, nor is the length of this response right now. When I click send, it's going to go ahead and only return the data that I asked for. So our response is much more manageable because I'm only giving back the data that our front end needs. And so, of course, you could handle this from your front end. But if you know that it's a repeatable request that you're always going to make it, why not put it inside your middleware and have that do most of the work? And again, this is a very simple implementation, but you could write some additional logic to do the things that you want. I know we're going through a lot of stuff here, but I figured to give a broad overview and talk about many things that you could keep on the top of mind and then use the documentation to be able to look and dive deeper. So next, let's take a look at policies. And you could look at the documentation to see how you would create a policy, or you could use that Strapi generate CLI command that I showed earlier with you to scaffold that policy for you. And then you could go ahead and add your logic. So in my code, I create a policy called isArticleAuthor. So basically, is the user logged in the author of the article? So inside this policy, I'm getting the user and I'm getting the article ID. If there is no article ID or user provided, I'm throwing new policy error, missing valid credentials. If the right items are provided, I'm going ahead and searching if that article with that ID exists. If it does, I'm going to go ahead and run my isArticleAuthor function, which basically checks the article author ID with the logged in user ID. If those match, yes, you have the permission to do what you need, and the policy returns true, which means the author will be able to update or delete the article. And if it doesn't match, we will throw a policy error says you're not the author of this article. Now, in order to hook this policy up after you create it, you need to add it inside the routes folder inside the articles.js file. You would pass a config object, and for every controller you want to add, for instance, find one, update, and delete, you would add your policy. Notice that I'm adding that policy to update and delete. If you wanted to add your policy to a custom controller that you created, you would do it under your custom routes that I have here. So if I wanted to include that policy here, I would place it inside this array. So let's test the policy out and see if it works. So I'm going to go ahead and log in one more time. I'm going to use my JWT token for my logged in user. I'm going to go to my post. We have two posts. Post 12 is the one that I wrote to make sure that we have the correct credentials here. I am the author. Since I am the logged in user who wrote this article, I should be able to update. So click send. And here we are. We were able to update the article. Following article with the ID of 13, I did not write it. So I am not the author and I should not be able to submit this request. My policy should throw an error. So let's see. And of course, we have policy error. You're not the author of this article. Now, the last thing I wanted to do is to share with you lifecycle hooks. Lifecycle hooks are functions that get triggered when the Strapi queries are called. And you could do some interesting things either before you do something or after you do something. For instance, we have before create, before update, after create, after update, or after delete. And so these are functions that you could hook into to trigger additional behaviors. So let's take a look at how I used mine. In order to add a lifecycle method, you go to your content type. In my case, it was the articles. And inside content types, you create a file called lifecycles.js. And here I have two different hooks that I'm calling, before update and after update. In before update function, I wanted to check if the slug was provided and if it matches the title, because you want the slug be based off the title. And what I'm doing is just checking if the slug doesn't match the title, create a new slug based on the title. And the second function after the article is updated, I am calling my email service that I created here that will send me an email telling me, hey, somebody just updated an article. I know these are very brief examples, but I just wanted to showcase some of the cool things you could do when using before update, after update, or any one of those other lifecycle methods. And here I have a service that I created called send emails, basically hooked up to my SendGrid provider, which will basically send a very simple email letting me know that someone updated an article. So let's take a look at it in action. I want to update this article. And typically you need to provide a slug, right? I need to have a slug provided here. And the slug should match or at least be based on the title. So if I do blah, what happens when I click send, notice that the title is I'm not the author, even though I provided blah. In my return response, you see I'm not the author, but you also see the correct slug. I'm not the author. So basically this was handled by before update. It checked the slug and the title. Do they match? If not, it will go ahead and make the appropriate slug. This also works if there is no slug provided. So before update will check. If there's no slug, create a new slug based on the title. This should be a new slug. Let's click send. And as you could see, even though I did not provide a slug in my request, notice that title, this should be a slug. And now we have a new slug created. So these are the cool things you could do using your lifecycle methods. And here I created before update, which will handle that slug functionality that I showed you. And after update, you will just have to trust me on this. Whenever you update a article, I do get an email because my phone's been bugging me this whole day while testing this feature. Article has been updated. There it is. All right, now the fun part. Let's talk about Strapi Cloud. It's out now. You could learn more by going strapi.io/cloud, click on request trial. I already have an account, so I'm able to create a project. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click create new project. You could pick the plan. We decided to start with our mid-tier plan, which is $99 a month. I believe you do get a 7-day free trial. You click next, and here it's going to ask you to select your project that you would usually pick from your GitHub repo. So I have this cloud blog demo site that I'm going to deploy. Back in my Strapi Cloud account, I'm going to search for that repo, click next. It's going to deploy from the main branch. I have my credentials, click create, and it's going to go ahead and start deploying our project. Now, while this is deploying and taking some time, we'll check in with this in just a minute. I want to talk about our DEETS feature, which is data export, import, transfer system. And why this is important, because it's going to make the migration process and moving data across environments much easier. If you migrated from version Strapi 3 to 4, you know that the migration process was very difficult, especially when it came to data migration. And the goal of DEETS is to alleviate this process. I'm going to show you a quick example here on my local app first. So here's my Strapi blog here. And what I want to do is I want to take the data that I have here and save it to local files. We could run yarn Strapi help export, which is going to show us some options that we could pass. We're going to do a very simple export of our data and save it locally to our disk. So I'm going to run yarn Strapi export without any encryption. We're going to save it to file, which is going to be called export no encrypt. What this is going to do is going to go ahead and take and export all my data. And here you could see all the files that are exported locally to my computer. So if I start my project right now, and we go to our local host, here we are, and I refresh, I had data here that I just exported. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete everything just to kind of show you this. Delete categories, delete everything, delete our, well, we didn't have any users. So I deleted all the files about, let's delete our about entry. Sounds good. Let's delete all of our global stuff. So I just deleted all the items that I had. Thankfully, I did just recently export them. So now we're going to go ahead and use our import feature to import that data back. And similar to our previous command, let me stop the server here. We're going to run yarn Strapi help import, and it's going to show us different flags that we have available here. Now, I'm going to import the same data that we just exported by running yarn Strapi import, the file flag, and the name of the file that we created. Go ahead, click enter. This is going to overwrite and delete our database. Sounds good. And now this went ahead and imported all the items. So if we take a look now where we didn't have anything before, go back to our content manager and refresh. Of course, you need to start Strapi. Don't forget to do that. Let's do yarn develop. Fantastic. It's going to get going. And let's refresh. Awesome. And notice we have all our items back again. So this is another way where you could export, import data locally and move it across environments. But if you want to push something to another instance of Strapi, we need to use our transfer protocol, which is part of DEETS. Currently, we have the push, and in the next release, Strapi 4.9, which should be coming up in a month or so, we're going to have the pull, ability to pull data. And so let's take a look at our deployment, see how's it going along here. Now that our cloud project has successfully deployed, let's go ahead and visit our application. I already went ahead and created my first admin user. So let me log in with my credentials. And as we take a look here, we see that we don't have any of our content. So let's go ahead and use our DEETS transfer feature to transfer our local data to the cloud. The first thing we have to do is in settings, create our transfer token. Let's click on create new transfer token, call it token, just because I'm too lazy to type, 7 days, because I'm just going to do this transfer once, and click save. Now you're going to see this token. Make sure you copy it because next time you see the screen, this token won't be available to you and you'll have to regenerate it. So go ahead and save. Notice the token disappears for us. So I hope you saved it in a good spot. So in our terminal, let's run yarn strapi help transfer to see our options. As you could see, we have two important flags. We need to provide the destination URL and then the token. So let's start by doing yarn strapi transfer and let's do --2. That's going to be your cloud URL, including the /admin. Let's copy and paste it. Next, make sure you have your token handy that we created because it is required to complete this transfer. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it here. Once you paste your token, the transfer will delete all the data in the remote database and media files. Are you sure you want to proceed? Click yes, and it'll go ahead and will do the transfer for us. So what it's doing is taking my local data from my Strapi application and moving it to the cloud. This is awesome because now we have a way to easily export, import data from Strapi and have ability to move it to any instance of our Strapi application, even if it's on the cloud. And here we could see all the data that was transferred to our cloud application. And this could also be any other remote application or local environment to another local environment. So let's go to our content manager. And as you could see, we have all our articles, categories, and we didn't have any users saved, but we could go ahead and create the users here. So that was the demo of the cloud and of our Deeds protocol. I know this talk ended up being a little bit on the longer side, but I wanted to stuff as much value as I could into this presentation. I wanted to focus on two things, which was why Strapi is awesome because it's highly customizable, show you some example, as well to showcase Strapi Cloud and our Deeds feature, which allows you to import and export data very easily, as well as our transfer feature that allows you to push. And in Strapi 4.9.0, we will have the pull feature, and this will allow you to easily move data across multiple Strapi instances, allows you to back up your data with ease. And what's awesome, as this API becomes available in the future, you will be able to programmatically access the transfer protocol, which will allow you to create your own providers. So if you want to have a provider that moves data, let's say from WordPress to Strapi, you would be able to create one yourself. And by using this transfer protocol, you will have an easier time of moving data from one instance to another instead of relying heavily on custom database migration script. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, you could always hit me up on Twitter at coding30, or you could find me on our Discord server. I'll make sure to put the links below. And if you have any questions on anything we've done, Monday through Friday on our Discord, we do have Strapi open office hours at 12:30 US Central Time. So stop on by, ask your questions, and I'll see you there. And thanks again for everybody here, and thank you for inviting me to this awesome meetup. Take care.